Hello listeners, this is mattomunoz, staff writer for Moss Magazine. The following audio is part 1 of my exclusive 3-part interview with Tower of Power's Emilio Castillo, recorded on September 10, 2006. In this first segment, Emilio talks about his musical beginnings with his brother Jack and how his soul-funk horn-playing band took the Bay Area music scene by storm in the middle of the psychedelic movement of the 1960s. Enjoy.
I didn't start music till I was 14, but when I started music, it became my whole life. I mean, literally, one day my dad said, "You're going to have to find something to keep you off the street, or you ain't ever coming to that room again as long as you live." And we said, "We want to play music, Dad," you know, and from that day on, I mean, we literally started a band that day. Mm-hmm. We didn't, learn our instruments and, practice every day for years and then join a band. We started the band and learned as we went. Wow. And I've had a band ever since. And my parents decided one day that they were going to move back to Detroit from California. Mm-hmm. Our whole life was wrapped around this band. Yeah. And all of a sudden they said, "We're moving." And we're like, "No, what do you mean we're moving? This is what we do. This is our life." And so they said, "Okay, you can stay, but you can only stay for a year. If nothing happens with the band within 1 year, you got to come back to us." And, they split, and then shortly after that, we got busted by the Alcoholic Beverage Control for being underage, playing in a nightclub. And so we weren't able to play in any nightclubs anymore because all the clubs were told about us, and they said, "If you hire this band, we'll take your liquor license away." And so we had no jobs, and we hadn't played any high schools in years, because we had been playing clubs. Yes. So we had no connections for high school. So we literally had no work. And we're out there, two young boys, 17 and 18, living alone for the first time in our lives, and we're starving, And the only sort of glimmer on the horizon was that we had gotten this audition at the end of the year at the Fillmore West for Bill Graham, and everybody was trying to get signed, Yeah. We've just practiced. Yeah. That's all we did. Every single day we practiced. Me and Doc were writing all those songs that later appeared on the East Bay Grease and Bump City Records, and by the time we got to the end of the year, we were so broke and so far at the end of our rope that I told the guys, if nothing happens with this audition, I'm going to Detroit to visit my parents for the holidays, and I'm going to stay if nothing happens from this. And I went to Detroit after the audition. I mean, we played our hearts out, but we didn't know that he dug it or anything. We played, and I remember somebody told me, "Bill Graham wants to see you in his office," and I went in there, and he was just sitting there counting stacks of money. And I was just sitting there, and he was real scary, so I didn't even say a word. I just sat there. And then finally he turns around and he hands me some money, And I was like, "What's this?" He goes, "Your pay." And I go, "My pay? We thought we were auditioning for free, He goes, "No, you get paid." I forget what he gave me, $125 or something, Yeah. And I was like, wow, and I split. That was it. He didn't say nothing. Yeah. And then I caught the plane to Detroit, and I was there for a couple of days visiting my family. And Doc calls up, and he says, "You got to come back. He dug it." And I said, "Who dug it?" He says, "Bill Graham." I go, "Man, hock the organ and send me a ticket." He wound up signing us to all these contracts, and we did our first record, and we were off to the races.
How did the name come about? What does Tower of Power mean?
I just thought it described the band's sound well. I was looking for a name that would fit in at the Fillmore. We were doing a little bit of recording in Hayward, California at a little studio called Baytown Records. And, we were trying to think of a kind of a psychedelic name, This guy there that owned the studio, one of the owners, he had written a list of potential band names, all weird names, like Quicksilver Messenger Service and Big Brother and the Holding Company, those kind of names. And I was looking through the list, and, none of them really appealed to me. I didn't want a real weird name, but I wanted something that, was going to be hipper than the Motowns, which is what we were called. And I saw that name, Tower of Power, and I said, that describes our sound. I told the guys, and they said, yeah. So we became Tower of Power.
Being a non-black band, what you guys were playing would be considered black music, especially in the 60s right there at that time. How were you received at that time? 68, 69, Summer of Love, all that stuff, especially in the Bay Area. And then you guys come along with this funk sound. I know, James Brown was still doing really strong, but, when you guys came out, how did they react to it?
Well, the whole sort of psychedelic hippie era had been going on for about 4 years, or at least 3, you know. And all those bands, the Grateful Dead, Quicksilver, Messenger Service, Jefferson Airplane, Big Brother and the Holding Company, you know, Moby Grape, all those bands were already, you know, popular. They were big stars already, and they were performing all over, you know, and people had seen them. But during that time, Bill Graham had been bringing in these other acts. He was trying to expose the people in the Bay Area to different kinds of music. So on any given night, you might see Boz Scaggs, Taj Mahal, and Miles Davis. You know, and the next night you might see Big Brother and the Holding Company, Otis Redding, and Muddy Waters. Or you would have Tito Puente and Quicksilver Messenger Service and Buddy Guy. You know what I'm saying? And so the collective ear of the Bay Area was really getting tuned to a much higher level. And so by the time we came along, now they've had sort of 3 years of being exposed to, you know, musicians that take chances, all these psychedelic musicians, plus all these other jazz, blues, soul acts, Latin acts, you know, and Santana had just gotten really popular. And so their minds were pretty open, you know, and here we come, an all-white band with a black singer, and we're playing soul music better than most black bands at the time in the Bay Area. And, you know, it was just the perfect timing. They were ready for it. I mean, we came out, I remember, you know, they looked at us when we walked on stage, and we were all dressed like hippies. You know, we had those, at the time, velour shirts were very popular. And we were wearing velour shirts, but they were so worn out that all the velour was gone. You know, it was just the burlap that the velour was attached to, you know, and then a bunch of holes in there from roach burns, you know, from when we were smoking pot, and sparks would fall on our shirts. So we had all these holes in our shirts, and we're all wearing, you know, what then was called navy bell bottoms. You know, it was like these denim bell bottom pants everybody was wearing at the time, and you know, we come stumbling out there looking like a motley crew, and everybody kind of took a look at us. They had already saw that night 4 other bands, and they were all the same. They were all like 4-piece rock and roll bands playing in the key of A or E, and they were tired, you know, and then they see us come stumbling out with all these horns and these worn-out shirts looking bedraggled, and they just turned around and started walking out because we were the last act of the night. And the first thing we did was we hit that James Brown tune, and it started out with this big horn like, and man, it was like somebody said about, you know, because the entire crowd just like turned around and started walking back in, you know. And then I seen a door open in the back of the room, and I seen this head stick out, and it was Bill Graham. You know, and it was like he heard them horns, man, and he heard that rhythm, because he was a big fan of salsa.
Really?
He's from New York, you know, but he listened to Tito Puente, Paul Mary, Willie Colon, all that stuff, you know. Yeah, he just looked in the room, he saw everybody turn around and start marching back in.
Yeah, his visionary thing that he has going on.
It's weird too, you know, because we were considered like the nobodies in the Bay Area, you know. I mean, we weren't very popular. There were tons of very popular bands like The Loading Zone, Sweet Linda Divine. All these bands were trying to get signed by Bill's new label, and they all auditioned, but we got signed.
What was the name of the record label?
San Francisco Records. Yeah, that was the one distributed by Atlantic that we got signed to, and then he had another label, a sister label called Fillmore Records, and that was distributed by Columbia. And so he was signing acts for those labels, and when people found out that we got signed, they were devastated. I remember the Loading Zone. We used to share a rehearsal hall with the Loading Zone. You know, they always thought of us as, oh, you know, these cute little kids who share a rehearsal room and help pay our rent, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, all of a sudden, man, the cute little kids got signed, and they were stunned. And we went right to their manager and we said, Bill Graham wants to sign us, and we don't have a clue what to do about it. And he started managing us.
What artists have influenced the Tower of Power sound? Obviously James Brown, but what are some of the
Howard,
artists?
I don't know if you're familiar with Howard Tate, but he had a song out in the 60s called Stop, and he had another one called Baby I Love You, and he had an album that was produced by a pretty famous producer named Jerry Ragavoy, and they had a big horn section on every song, and in particular, they had a very predominant baritone saxophone in the mix. And that we kind of patterned the sound of our horn section after that album because we could hear the baritone really strong. And of course, we had Doc, and Doc had this big fat tone. And we just, we also patterned ourselves after a lot of Memphis music, like Otis Redding, Sam and Dave, that guy Eddie Floyd, that kind of stuff.
Did you start out playing the saxophone?
I started on sax, and then I moved over to the organ, and then I went back on sax, and then I wound up, I was the lead singer, I played organ while I sang, and then in the middle of the song, when it would come to the part where the horn section was going to do a part, I would play with them.
Wow.
And I did that for a lot of years, but then when I got Doc in the band, we decided that we were going to look for a black singer, because my favorite band at the time was this band called the Spiders in the East Bay, and they had this 6'3" black chick named Trudy Johnson, and we thought she was the most exciting singer we'd ever seen, and we thought that's what we need in front of the band is some kind of black singer. So we were looking for a girl, and we never found one. I remember at the time I auditioned this girl named Maxine Howard, and she brought a guy with her. And she said, you should hear this guy sing. And I said, well, I'm not looking for a guy. She said, well, check him out anyway. So we let him audition. He sounded really great, and that turned out to be Lenny Williams. And then I ran into him, years later at Larry Graham's house, and that's how I got him in the band.
Wow, Larry Graham from Sly and the Family Stone.
Yeah, in Graham Central Station.
Graham Central Station, yeah.
Stay tuned to part 2 of my exclusive 3-part interview with Tower of Power's Emilio Castillo here on MossBakersfield.com. This is part 2 of my interview with Tower of Power's Emilio Castillo, recorded September 10th, 2006. Tower of Power continued to flourish throughout the 1970s with hit albums and singles, even getting major kudos from the godfather of soul himself, James Brown, for their innovative creations. But in the music industry, change is inevitable. Find out how the band learned a valuable lesson in segment 2.
A little bit more about the development of the style. The Rocco Prestia, bass player, and Dave Garibaldi on the drums. Now, you can hear a little of the James Brown influence actually a lot, but the syncopation that they kind of developed is a lot more complex than some of the James Brown.
No, the original drummer in the band was my brother Jack, and I was the one dictating the beats to my brother.
Really?
I had this idea at a young age, probably as young as 16 years old. I started thinking that, rather than, everybody was doing songs like Midnight Hour and 99 and a Half, stuff like that. So I thought, well, if we're going to do these songs, why don't I, change them up? And so I would make up these weird little percolator beats, and I would dictate them to my brother. I would say, do this with your bass drum, do this with your snare, do this with your hi-hat. I would make up this weird beat, and then I would go to Rocco. I also played guitar, and I would go to Rocco, and I would show him a bass line that would fit to that beat. And then I would show the guitar player how to play a certain part that would kind of go in between the bass and the drum part. And so I was always inventing these little sort of fabrics of rhythm. And so we got really tight and really good at doing that. And then when my brother left the band and Garibaldi came in, here was a guy who he could syncopate beats far beyond anything we had ever done. And he was able to play things that I had heard in my head for years. And so I was the first guy he ever met that thought in terms of, rather than, okay, let's just do this song like everybody else does it, no, let's make it different. And so he and we just immediately bonded because we looked at things rhythmically the same way. And we just started sort of pushing the envelope with the rhythms. And then, I just continued to show Rocco the different things he could do on the bass. But as soon as Dave came in, there was something about the way he played that really freed Rocco up. And so pretty soon all these sort of rumbling lines were coming out of Rocco from out of nowhere, and it just gradually developed into a style.
How was the reaction from someone like James Brown? He hears you guys playing that, and some of the black groups, Funkadelic and stuff like that. How did they react to what you guys were doing over there? Because they were playing, a lot kind of straightforward funk. They had the feel and everything, but like you said, a lot of the thumping bass lines and a lot of more intricate stuff.
No, it was a definite eye opener for all those groups. I remember going to see James Brown in 1974. I snuck my way into the gig. I told him I was on James Brown's guest list, that I was the leader of Tower of Power, and this lady came and got me, and they took me to this room, and pretty soon James Brown came in, and he told me that every Tuesday we get the new releases, and I make the whole band listen to all the new releases. He goes, usually we'll put on an album, 1 or 2 tracks, and then go on to the next one. He said, but Tower of Power is the only album I've ever played from my that band that we played it all the way through from top to bottom and then played it over and over again. And then he took me out front, gave me a real nice seat, and me and my party, you know, and he dedicated the whole show to us, you know. So wow. I know that we really were an eye-opener for him.
Now, what was the CD he was talking about? Was it the East Bay Grease, or was it?
I'm not sure. I believe he used to do that with all our CDs.
Really?
So by then we had East Bay Grease, Bump City, we had Tower of Power, and Back to Oakland. All four of those records, and he seems very familiar with all of them.
Yeah, those are really heavy albums, man. That's a great story. I'd always wondered about that because I know you really look up to James Brown. Feeling and style is so prevalent throughout it, and so you can't deny that James Brown influence.
I remember it was funny because like I said, I scammed myself into the place. I just went to the back door of the Circle Star, and I said, I'm on James Brown's guest list. You know, and they go, well, who are you? You know, I go, well, I'm the leader of Tower of Power, and I got this girl with me, and I got her girlfriend, and then my buddy is her date. And they said, well, we don't have you on the guest list. And I go, well, you better check with James Brown's people. Pretty soon this really beautiful black girl came and got me, and she goes, Mr. Brown will see you in a moment. And they took me to this room, and there was some coffee and drinks in there. And it was the same dressing room that I used when I played there, because I used to play that theater, you know. And so I was pouring myself a cup of coffee, and all of a sudden I hear, do you know where you are? And I turn around, and there's this big, huge black dude. I mean, block out the sun big. And I go, yeah, I know where I am. And I turn around, proceed to pour my coffee. He goes, do you know where you are? And I go, yeah, I'm at the Circle Star Theater. And he goes, you are in Mr. James Brown's personal dressing room. Who are you? And I go, I'm sorry, man. I go, they brought me in here. I'm a guest of James Brown. I'm the leader of Tower of Power, and this was my dressing room when I played here. I was just pouring a cup of coffee, but we'll get out of here. And he goes, I'm sorry. He says, Mr. Brown's, he's just finishing up his hair. He'll be out in a minute. And he comes out, he's got all these rollers in his hair. You know? And he comes out, and that's when he told me the story about Record Day.
Out of all the great songs you've written, you know, they're all staples of the Tower of Power concerts. What is your favorite song?
Well, I couldn't give you my favorite because I got a lot of favorites, but I really, these days, in the last couple of years, I've really enjoyed playing Time Will Tell. We started doing it about 4 years ago, and or maybe 3 years ago. It hasn't been that long. But, you know, we hadn't played it probably in 30 years. And it's so musical, it's so emotional, you know, it's a step ahead of the rest. You know, when we're playing that song, I feel like we're just a step ahead of the rest of the bands, you know. It's really an amazing musical piece. It's on the Back to Oakland record. And on the Back to Oakland record, you know, we did Time Will Tell with, strings and French horns and everything. But we have a really good arrangement of it live, and it really comes over great. Plus, our new singer, Larry Braggs, he sings the heck out of it. I mean, he really, sometimes he'll be singing the ride out, and he'll hit these notes that are high and so emotional that people would just stand up in the middle of the song. And that always blows my mind to have that kind of an effect on an audience.
Yeah. You know, are some of the songs, are they based on personal experiences? Like, for example, did you love You're Still a Young Man? Is that you?
I based it off a personal experience, and then I wrote a story based on that. I had a girlfriend that was 6 years older than me, and she had broken up with me, and it was devastating. And then we wound up getting back together, and it was never quite the same, you know. But I remember, you know, the devastated feeling I had, and how, you know, I kept telling her, you know, and she was, one of the lines she told me that was, you know, you're too young for me, you know. She said, well, you should be with somebody your own age. Because I was 18, she was 24. I was like, no, I'm in love with you. You know, I don't want to be with no 18-year-old girl, you know. I love you, you know. And so I based that song off of that relationship. But, you know, it's not like 100% off of that relationship. I finished the words. I just kind of
inspired by your.
I made my own story. I made my own story for the song.
You know, now with the music business changed over 35 years, and you guys have stayed in it. And you know, when you guys first started out, you guys were starting out, you know, hardcore funk, you know, East Bay Grease style, and then you come into the 70s, and you know, some of your CDs kind of reflected a little bit more dance stuff. It was but kind of a little bit of a disco feel. Were you really pressured to change the style a little bit in the 70s?
Yes, we were. The record company, at that time we had changed record companies. We left Warner Brothers. We went because Columbia just basically bought us away from them. They gave us so much money, there was no way we could turn them down. And we went over there, but they looked at us as a problem that needed to be solved. Uh-huh. And whenever you view something that in that negative a way, you've already lost the war before it even started, Uh-huh. So they were like always telling us, "Oh, well, why don't you try to sound like the other bands on the radio? Let's get one of these producers that produce these other bands, and maybe you could redo an old Motown song, disco style, or write some sort of a dance, or something that they can play in the discos, and those suits." I call them suits, over there at the big corporate buildings. They think they just, they got a few things that work for them, and they think, well, we'll just have everybody do this, and everybody will make money, and I can go home and look good to my CEO, and But at the time we were young, and you always want to try to please your record company, of course. So we tried things, and it was a good experience for us after the fact, because we learned a very profound lesson from that period, and that is stay true to yourself. Yeah. They have a saying, actually, it's shoemaker, stick to thy last, which means do what you do best. Don't try to do what somebody else does best. Don't try to be someone else. Don't try to follow trends. Set your own trends, And so we were always sort of trendsetters, and then, because of that mentality of let's solve this problem, we started following instead. And so as soon as we realized that was getting us nowhere, we went back to being trendsetters rather than trend followers.
Listen to part 3 of my exclusive 3-part interview with Tower of Power's Emilio Castillo right here on mossbakersfield.com. This is part 3 of my interview with Tower of Power's Emilio Castillo, recorded September 10th, 2006. Years of hard-earned respect and success have made Tower of Power one of the most revered bands in the history of popular music. Idolized and imitated by legions of fans and tribute bands, Bay Area's funkiest now look to the future. Emilio Castillo, considered by many Latinos to be a cultural icon and role model for the strides he's made in life, talks about his cultural identity, the future of Tower of Power, and Bakersfield fans.
The band Tower of Power, the band's name carries a lot of weight and respect among musicians and the music biz. You think that Tower of Power is kind of a springboard for solo success? How do you see that?
I think it's been true for a lot of young players. Doc has a saying. He says, Tower of Power, it looks good on the resume. Yeah. It's like if you're going for a gig and you say, oh, yeah, I did 4 years with Tower of Power, they're going to listen to you.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
And, and it is very much like a little university here. People come in, they're excellent players, but they leave with having grown to a place where they have found a voice. I think that really is the difference between a good musician and a classic musician. Classic musicians have a voice. Yeah. They've found their voice, and they know how to use it when they communicate music. Other musicians that are just good, they have a lot of technique, and they're able to play with the best of them, but that quality of being, quote, special comes when you find your voice. Right. And I think that's what happens with a lot of musicians that come into the band. If you look at players like Richard Elliott, Lenny Pickett, Chester Thompson, Dave Garibaldi, Huge Groove, Lee Thornburg, Al Chez, these are all people playing on the TV shows. And, Lenny Pickett's musical director for Saturday Night Live.
Oh, yes.
Lee Thornburg's the trumpet player on The Tonight Show. Al Chez is the trumpet player on The Letterman Show. Mm-hmm. All these guys, they came here, they were good musicians, they left, they were excellent musicians that had found a voice.
Okay, well now you're coming back to Bakersfield. It's an annual tradition here at the Kern County Fair, and Bakersfield is definitely known for some of the most rabid Tower of Power fans around. Do you look forward to your annual visit back over here to Bakersfield?
I do. It's always good. We've never had a bad gig there, ever. We've never gone there and had a stale, dead crowd. Never once. I was just talking about this gig a couple of weeks ago because I was with my road manager. We were doing this long drive, and he happened to mention Bakersfield. I go, "Oh, we're doing Bakersfield again." He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Man, how many years have we done that gig?" It's got to be like 15 years or something.
Yeah.
Usually these fairs, they pay good money. The fairs, I mean, they really pay a lot of dough, But usually they have a motto. They bring in an act 2 years in a row, and then they don't hire them for a couple of years, and then they might bring them back again.
Mm-hmm.
But, some of these fairs, like the San Mateo Fair, the Bakersfield Fair, Fresno, some of these fairs, they bring us every single year because it's automatic home run.
Yeah.
And, and I'll tell you something. I think a lot of it has to do with the Hispanic public. Bakersfield, Fresno, all those areas have strong Latino population. We're an automatic home run for those kind of places, and people always come. They're always good audiences. They give a lot of energy to the band, and that brings out a lot of energy in us. It's just always a positive experience.
That was going to be my next question. I wanted to ask you about the Latino appeal, and you just answered my question right there because it is true. Your music means a lot to, especially a lot of the Latinos, and you yourself as a Latino.
I'm half. Yeah, I'm Mexican and Greek. My father's Mexican.
Do you feel like a role model for Latino musicians?
On the one hand, I know that I am a role model to Latin musicians. There's no question about it. I can't tell you how many times, interviewers, fans, people in general come to me as a Latino and say, you don't know what you mean to the youth, the young Latinos coming up today. You're an inspiration. You're an example, a great example. But on the other hand, I feel like a real farce because I don't speak Spanish. I'm about as what do we call a güero, I'm just like I'm a total American, because I grew up in the 50s in Detroit. I didn't leave Detroit till I was 11. 1961, we left Detroit. So
born and raised in Detroit?
Till I was 11.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And in Detroit, like all these Mexican people moved up to Detroit from like Texas. They crossed the border into Texas, and then they would migrate to Detroit because of the war, because of the factories up there. There were all the cars were being made, and all the tanks, and all that stuff. And so my dad's family came up there. There's a whole bunch of Mexicans, and then there's a whole bunch of Greeks too that came on the boats, came through Ellis Island, and then migrated to Detroit because of the factories. They could open these little diners or these little hot dog stands and serve all the factory workers. And that's how my parents wound up in Detroit. But in the 50s, it was not about let's be bilingual, and it was about you speak American. Mm-hmm. You speak English, and if you have any other ethnic roots, you learn to hide them as soon as possible. That's how I was brought up. My father speaks Spanish fluently. Mm-hmm. My mother could read Spanish, even though she was Greek.
Wow.
And she spoke Greek fluently. Uh-huh. But they never taught us a single word because it was the American way. It was like you brought up your kids to be Americans. Mm-hmm. And so I regret that, and I feel kind of like a fraud when these people are telling me, you're a Latino icon, and I'm like, man, I wish I could just, have 14 words of conversation with you in Spanish, and I can't.
But the thing is that there's a lot of Latinos that can relate to you because in the second and third generation Hispanics, we are aware of the culture, but we don't all speak Spanish. I mean, my Spanish is so, and both of my parents are Mexican, but
I know that all these young people look up to me, and I'm grateful for that, and I try to be the best example of that I can be. I just wish I was a better Latino. My wife is Mexican. My wife is Mexican, and she was brought up in East L.A. She lived there all her life, and she speaks Spanish. But even her, she didn't learn Spanish until she was like 16. Yeah. Her mother forced her to learn. Uh-huh. And her Spanish, she's very embarrassed about speaking Spanish to what I would call, quote, real Mexicans.
Oh, I hear you, yeah.
My father, about 10 years ago, married a Mexican woman. I mean, literally, illegal. Uh-huh. And so, like, My wife, she feels embarrassed when she speaks to her because she really speaks Spanish. My wife, her Spanish is something she learned in school as a way, as an English-speaking Mexican American. But when we're out and about, it's helpful when my wife is with me.
Absolutely. What's next for Tower of Power? Can we look forward to a new CD?
We're waiting right now. We have all this footage that we shot last year in Leverkusen, Germany. A DVD just came out great, and we just finished the contract with those people, and we're supposed to be getting the footage and just sort of finalizing the mix, and then that DVD will be released. And we're waiting on Rocco to recover from his heart operation, and he had open heart surgery a couple of weeks ago.
I read about that.
And he should be ready to go in about 8 weeks, and then we're going to schedule some rehearsals to do a new CD. And we're planning on doing an all-remake CD, all old soul music, Tower of Power style. Also written a whole bunch of new original material, so, the thinking is to go in and cut all of it, so that we have 2 CDs ready and put out one at a time.
Would you like to send out a message to all of your Bakersfield Tower Power fans?
I look forward to seeing them all again, and my favorite part of the Bakersfield Fair, of course, is the tacos.
Yeah.
They have the best tacos of any place I play anywhere. And as soon as I get there, I send a runner to go get me a plate of lengua tacos.
Yeah, Becky Aguilar, right?
Yep.
Yeah, she's the one, man. She loves you guys. Well, we'll make sure you get the tacos because I know who she gets the tacos from Paco's Tacos, which is my friend's business, and we'll make sure. I'll call Becky myself and tell her. Well, Emilio, thank you very much. Thank you for taking so much time, and of course, we wish Rocco a speedy recovery and to get him back in the lineup, and we look forward to.
He's doing really good, so.
Beautiful.
He should be back soon.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Emilio, and I'll look forward to seeing you here in Bakersfield again. Thank you very much.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed my exclusive interview with Tower Power's Emilio Castillo. And don't forget to pick up the latest issue of Moss Magazine every week throughout Bakersfield, or check it out right here on mossbakersfield.com. Celebrating our 1-year anniversary on September 16th, 2006, Moss Magazine. Culture, pride, community.
So you wanna jump